They found us. We have to go now.
He whispered something to the Apache woman, and now she awaits the coming night in silence. She lived where the land opened wide and quiet, where the sky felt closer to the earth and the wind carried old stories. The Apache woman had grown up on this land just as her mother and grandmother had before her. Every rock, every tree, every curve of the ground held meaning. This place was not just home. It was memory, identity, and responsibility. She rose each morning before the sun, following a rhythm taught by generations, moving through her day with calm strength and purpose. Her life was simple but never empty. She gathered what was needed, cared for the land, and respected the silence that surrounded her. Silence was not loneliness to her. It was a companion. In quiet moments, she listened to the earth, to the wind brushing against dry grass, to the distant call of birds. These sounds reminded her she was never truly alone. She believed the land spoke to those who were patient enough to listen. People in nearby towns knew of her, but few truly knew her. Some saw her as distant, others as mysterious. She did not mind. She had learned long ago that not everyone needed to understand her life. She carried herself with dignity, shaped by stories of survival passed down through her family. Her ancestors had faced loss, struggle, and change, yet they endured. That endurance lived in her posture, her steady eyes, and her quiet confidence. On a warm afternoon, when the sun stood high and bright, she noticed something unusual. A man was walking toward the edge of her land. Outsiders rarely came this far. The path was not marked clearly, and most people avoided places they did not understand. She paused in her work, watching him from a distance. He moved carefully, as if unsure whether he was welcome. His steps were slow, respectful, not rushed. He did not look like someone seeking trouble. His clothes were worn, his face marked by time and experience. There was something heavy in the way he carried himself, as if he held a long journey inside him, not just behind him. When he noticed her, he stopped. He did not wave or call out. He waited. That alone told her much. Many men would have spoken loudly, announced themselves, or acted with confidence that bordered on disrespect. This man did none of that. He stood still, giving her the choice to approach or turn away. She felt no fear, only curiosity mixed with caution. She walked toward him slowly, her movements calm and measured. When she was close enough to see his eyes clearly, she noticed they held a quiet seriousness. He looked at her as one looks at something meaningful, not as something to be judged or claimed. They stood facing each other for a moment without speaking. The wind passed between them, lifting dust from the ground. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, careful, as if he did not want to disturb the space around them. He said he did not come by accident. He had been told about this land, about the woman who lived here. He said he had something important to do, though he did not yet say what that was. His words were simple, without decoration. He did not try to impress her or explain too much. She listened, her face calm, her eyes steady. She asked him why he had come. Her voice was soft but firm. It was the voice of someone used to being heard without raising it. He hesitated before answering. He said some paths take years to lead a person where they need to be. He said he had carried a message for a long time, unsure of when or how to deliver it. Only recently did he understand that this was the place he needed to come. She studied him carefully. Many people spoke in confusing ways when they wanted something. But this man did not ask for anything. He simply spoke as if releasing a weight he had carried too long. She told him he could speak, but she would decide what to do with his words. He nodded, accepting her condition without argument. They walked together a short distance, stopping near a tree that had stood there longer than either of them had been alive. The shade it offered felt steady and grounding. They sat across from each other, the land holding them in quiet witness. He told her a little about himself. He came from far away, from a life filled with movement and noise. He had worked many jobs, met many people, and seen places that never felt like home. Somewhere along the way, he said, he had crossed paths with a story connected to her people. At first, he ignored it. It did not seem like his place to interfere with a history that was not his own. But the story stayed with him. It returned in his thoughts, in his dreams, in moments of silence he could not escape. Over time, he realized that knowing something and doing nothing about it had become its own burden. She listened without interrupting. Her people valued listening as much as speaking. Words, once spoken, could not be taken back. It was better to hear fully before responding. As the sun began to lower slightly in the sky, the air changed. The light softened and the heat eased. The moment felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed. She asked him what the story was about. He did not answer right away. Instead, he asked her about the land, about her family, about how long she had lived here. His questions were gentle, respectful. He did not pry. He seemed to understand that trust was not given quickly. She shared only what she felt was necessary. She spoke of her grandparents, of lessons taught through actions rather than words. She spoke of loss, but not in detail. Some things were not meant to be explained to strangers. He listened closely, as if every word mattered. When she finished, he took a deep breath. He said the story he carried was tied to choices made long ago, choices that affected people who had no voice at the time. He said he did not come to excuse the past, nor to reopen wounds without reason. She felt a subtle tightening in her chest. Her people's history was filled with moments like that. Promises broken, truths hidden, voices ignored. She had learned to live with that weight, but it never truly disappeared. Before he could continue, she raised her hand slightly. She told him not everything needed to be said immediately. Some truths arrived slowly, like the night. She suggested they wait until later, when the sun was closer to the horizon. He agreed without question. He said he would wait as long as needed. They sat in silence after that. It was not uncomfortable. It felt deliberate. The land around them remained calm, as if acknowledging the importance of what was about to unfold. Eventually, he stood and said he would return before evening if she allowed it. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Permission was given, not lightly but thoughtfully. As he walked away, she watched him until he disappeared beyond the rise of the land. Only then did she return to her tasks, but her movements were slower now. Her thoughts drifted back to his words, to the weight she sensed behind them. She wondered why this moment had arrived now. She had lived many years without needing answers from outsiders, yet something in his presence felt different. Not threatening, not demanding, but purposeful. As the afternoon stretched on, she felt a quiet shift inside her. The day, which had begun like so many others, no longer felt ordinary. She did not know what the man would say when he returned, but she sensed it would touch something long buried. She prepared herself not with fear, but with steadiness. Whatever came next, she would meet it with the strength her ancestors had passed down to her. The sun continued its slow journey across the sky, unaware of the small but meaningful meeting it had witnessed. And as the shadows lengthened, the land seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what the coming evening would bring. The sun had begun to lean toward the west when the man returned. The light was softer now, spreading long shadows across the land. The air felt calmer, as if the heat of the day had slowly released its grip. The Apache woman noticed him before he spoke. His footsteps were careful, almost hesitant, as though he did not want to disturb the quiet that had settled. She was standing near her home, finishing a small task. When she looked up, she saw him stop at a respectful distance, just as he had earlier. He waited again. That patience told her he understood more than he let on. She nodded once, giving silent permission. He walked closer and stood where the ground was even. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The land seemed to stretch around them, wide and open, yet deeply personal. This was not a place for rushed words. They walked together toward the same tree as before. The shade felt cooler now, and a light breeze moved through the branches. The sound of leaves brushing against one another felt like quiet breathing. They sat facing each other, with enough space to remain comfortable. The man looked different now. Earlier he had carried the weight of arrival. Now he carried the weight of decision. His shoulders were tense, his hands resting together as if holding something unseen. He spoke first, his voice low. He said he had thought carefully about what to share and how to share it. He knew that words could cause harm even when spoken with good intentions. He did not want to do that. She listened closely, her expression calm but attentive. She had learned over the years that the most important moments often arrived quietly. He said that many years ago, when he was much younger, he worked with people who traveled through different regions, documenting old records and forgotten stories. At first, it had felt like just another job. Papers, notes, interviews, nothing personal. But then he came across information connected to her people, information that was incomplete and in some ways hidden. At the time, he said, he did not understand the importance of what he had found. He followed instructions, passed the work along, and moved on. Life continued. Years passed, yet the memory stayed with him, not clearly at first, but like a small stone in his shoe that could not be ignored. She remained silent, allowing him to continue. Her eyes stayed on his face, reading more than just his words. He said that as he grew older, he began to understand how silence could be harmful, how leaving things unfinished could affect lives far beyond one person. He started to question the choices he had made, not because he had acted with bad intent, but because he had not acted at all. He paused, looking down at the ground. The wind picked up slightly, lifting dust into the air. It felt as though the land itself was listening. He told her that what he carried was not a secret meant to shock or disturb. It was knowledge that belonged to others, not to him. For years, he had convinced himself that it was safer to stay quiet, that reopening the past would only bring pain. But he had learned that pain does not disappear just because it is ignored. The woman felt a familiar feeling rise inside her. She had seen this pattern before, not just in stories from her elders, but in her own life. Things left unspoken did not vanish. They waited. She asked him why he had come now. Her voice was steady, but the question held weight. He took a deep breath. He said that recently he had met an older man who reminded him of himself in unexpected ways. They spoke about choices, about responsibility, about what it meant to live honestly. That conversation stayed with him. It made him realize that some journeys were not meant to be comfortable. They were meant to be necessary. That was when he decided to stop running from what he knew. He followed the trail of information back to where it began. It led him here. She absorbed his words slowly. She did not rush to respond. Instead, she asked him what he planned to do with this knowledge. He said he did not want to decide alone. He believed that the truth belonged to her people. His role, if any, was simply to return it. He said he would accept whatever choice she made, whether she wanted to hear more or not. There was honesty in his tone, but also fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of causing harm even while trying to do the right thing. She looked out toward the horizon. The sky was beginning to shift colors, soft blues giving way to warmer tones. Evening was approaching. This time of day always reminded her of transitions, of things ending so that others could begin. She told him that her people valued truth, but they also valued balance. Not all truths were meant to be shared without care. Some required time, patience, and respect. He nodded. He said he understood. They sat quietly for a while after that. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. It felt thoughtful, full of things being considered rather than avoided. Eventually, he leaned forward slightly. His voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. He said that the information he carried involved land agreements from long ago. Agreements that were recorded one way on paper, but lived very differently by the people affected. He said that some records showed promises that were never fully honored. At the sound of this, her hands tightened slightly in her lap. She did not interrupt him, but something inside her stirred. Land was not just property to her people. It was life, history, and future all at once. He did not go into details. Instead, he said that the full truth was complex and could not be explained in a few sentences. What mattered was that the records existed and that they had been overlooked for a long time. He leaned closer, lowering his voice further, and whispered a few words meant only for her. The wind carried most sounds away, but those words stayed between them. They were not dramatic, they were not loud, but they carried weight. They confirmed what many had suspected but few had been able to prove. As he pulled back, she remained still. Her face did not change, but inside something shifted. The whisper did not surprise her completely, yet hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a new way. He apologized quietly, not in a way that tried to erase the past, but in a way that acknowledged it. He said he knew an apology could not fix what had already happened. He offered it anyway, because silence no longer felt right. She closed her eyes briefly, taking in a slow breath. When she opened them, she looked at him with calm clarity. She told him that words had power, but actions mattered more. If he truly believed in returning what did not belong to him, then he would need patience. Change did not happen quickly, especially when it involved deep roots. He said he was prepared for that. He said he had no timeline, no demand. He only wanted to begin. The sky darkened further as the sun dipped lower. Evening sounds began to rise. Insects, distant animals, the quiet settling of the land. She stood slowly, signaling that the conversation was nearing its end for now. He followed her lead, standing as well. She told him she needed time, not just to think, but to listen. To the land, to her ancestors, to her own understanding. She said she would not speak of this to anyone yet. Some things required silence before they could be shared. He accepted her words without argument. He said he would stay nearby, but only if she wished. Otherwise, he would leave and wait. She looked at him carefully, then told him he could stay until morning, but there would be no more discussion tonight. The night was for reflection, not answers. He thanked her genuinely. As he stepped back, she felt the weight of the day settle over her. The whisper still echoed in her thoughts, steady and unavoidable. As darkness approached, she remained standing, watching the land change with the fading light. She did not feel fear or anger. She felt responsibility. Whatever the truth held, she would face it with the same strength her people always had. And as the first stars began to appear, she prepared herself for a long night of quiet waiting, knowing that some silences carried more meaning than words ever could. Night settled slowly over the land, not all at once, but in gentle layers. The sky deepened from soft blue to dark purple and then to black, scattered with stars. The Apache woman sat outside her home, wrapped in a light covering, listening to the sounds that rose after sunset. The land felt different at night, more honest, more open. The man had moved a respectful distance away just as she asked. She knew he was nearby, but she did not see him. That was important. This time was not for talking. It was for listening. She closed her eyes and let the night surround her. The whisper he had spoken earlier returned to her thoughts again and again. It did not shout. It did not demand. It waited. That made it heavier. She thought of her grandmother who used to say that truth moved like water. If blocked, it would find another way. If ignored, it would slowly wear down stone. As a child, she had not fully understood those words. Now, sitting under the wide night sky, she did. Memories surfaced quietly. Stories told near firelight. Faces of elders who spoke carefully, sometimes stopping mid-sentence, choosing silence over explanation. As a younger woman, she had felt frustration in those moments. She wanted clear answers, full truths, but the elders knew something she did not then. Some truths arrived before people were ready. Others waited until the right listener appeared. She wondered if this was one of those moments. The land around her seemed awake. A distant animal moved through the brush. The wind shifted, brushing against her face. These were familiar sounds, comforting in their steadiness. They reminded her that life continued, regardless of human struggle. She stood and walked slowly across the ground, letting her feet feel the earth beneath them. This was how she grounded herself when her thoughts grew heavy. Each step reminded her where she belonged. As she walked, she thought about the man. He was not young, but not old either. He carried regret, that much was clear. Regret had a certain shape to it, one she recognized. It bent people inward, made them quieter. She did not sense falsehood in him, but sincerity alone was never enough. She asked herself what she truly felt. Anger, sadness, fear. None of them stood alone. Instead, she felt a calm awareness, like standing at the edge of a river, knowing she would have to cross it eventually. She returned to her seat and looked up at the stars. Her people had always found guidance in the sky, not answers exactly, but reminders. Life was larger than one moment, one decision. Still, each decision mattered. Hours passed quietly. The night grew cooler. At some point, she heard soft footsteps. The man stopped several steps away, just as before. He did not speak. He waited. She appreciated that. Many people feared silence. They filled it with unnecessary words. He did not. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice low but clear. She told him to sit, but not too close. He obeyed without question. She asked him one thing, not about documents or promises, but about himself. She asked him why the whisper had been so difficult to carry alone. He seemed surprised by the question. He took a moment before answering. He said that carrying knowledge without purpose felt like holding something borrowed for too long. It began to feel wrong, like a weight that did not belong to him. He said that for years he had told himself he was protecting others by staying quiet. But deep down, he knew he was protecting himself. From responsibility, from discomfort, from change. As he spoke, his voice remained calm, but his hands trembled slightly. He admitted that fear had played a larger role than he liked to admit. She listened without judgment. Fear was not unfamiliar to her. Her people had lived alongside it for generations. Fear did not make someone weak. Refusing to face it did. She asked him if he understood what could happen if the truth became known, not just for institutions or records, but for people, for communities, for individuals who had learned to live with loss. He said he did not know all the outcomes, but he knew that hiding the truth guaranteed only one result. Nothing would change. That answer stayed with her. She told him that change was not always gentle. Sometimes it disrupted lives that had already adapted to pain. She asked him if he was prepared for that weight. He said he did not expect forgiveness or praise. He expected resistance, doubt, and long conversations. He said that if the truth caused difficulty, then he would face that as well. She studied his face in the dim light. The fire she had lit earlier flickered softly between them, casting moving shadows. In those shadows, she saw not certainty but commitment. That mattered. She told him something she had never shared with many people. Years ago, when she was much younger, she had tried to uncover parts of her family's history. She had visited offices, spoken to officials, asked questions. She had been met with closed doors, polite smiles, and empty promises. Over time, she learned that persistence alone was not enough. Some systems were built to forget. She said that after a while she stopped asking, not because she stopped caring, but because she chose to protect her peace. The land gave her enough to live with dignity. Still, the questions never fully left her. The man listened carefully, his eyes fixed on the fire. She told him that his whisper had reopened those questions, not violently but firmly. Like a door gently pushed open after years of being closed. He apologized again, quietly. She raised her hand slightly, stopping him. She said this was not about apology. It was about responsibility. They sat in silence again. This silence felt different from the earlier ones. It was shared now, held between them. As the night moved deeper, she felt a decision forming. Not a final one, but the beginning of direction. She told him that if the records existed, they would need to be examined carefully. Not by one person, but by many, elders, advisors. People who understood both the written word and the living history. She said this would take time. Months, maybe years. She asked him if he was willing to step back and allow her people to lead. He said yes without hesitation. She told him that his role, if any, would be small and precise. No public speeches, no control, only support when asked. He agreed. The fire burned lower as the night passed. Eventually, the sky began to lighten slightly at the edges, signaling that morning was not far away. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. He stood as well. She told him that the coming day would look the same on the surface. The sun would rise, the land would remain, but underneath something had shifted. She asked him to rest and prepare himself for patience. Real change moved slowly. He thanked her, not with excitement but with quiet respect. As he walked back into the darkness, she remained standing, watching the first hint of dawn touch the horizon. She felt tired but steady. The whisper no longer echoed sharply. It had settled into something deeper, a responsibility she did not seek but did not avoid. As the night released its hold and the new day approached, she knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but it would be honest. And for her and for the land she loved, that was enough to take the next step forward. Morning arrived quietly as it always did. The first light touched the land gently, waking colors that had rested through the night. The Apache woman stood outside, breathing in the cool air. Birds began their soft calls and the world slowly returned to motion. On the surface, nothing had changed, but inside her the night had left its mark. She prepared for the day with care, moving through familiar tasks. These routines grounded her. They reminded her that life continued, even when difficult thoughts followed closely behind. She gathered what she needed, tended to small responsibilities, and allowed her mind to stay present. Still, the conversation from the night before remained close, like a quiet shadow. The man stayed where he was, keeping the distance she had asked for. He did not approach her, did not try to speak. She noticed that and appreciated it. Respect was not shown through words alone. It lived in behavior. As the sun climbed higher, she made a decision. This could not remain only between her and the man. What he had shared touched more than one life. It reached into the roots of her people's story, and those roots were not hers alone to carry. She set out on foot toward a place where elders often gathered. The path was long, but she welcomed the walk. It gave her time to think, to feel the land beneath her feet, to steady her heart. Each step felt purposeful. When she arrived, she was greeted with calm familiarity. The elders knew her well. They had watched her grow from a quiet child into a woman shaped by strength and patience. They could see something was weighing on her, though they did not press her immediately. They sat together in the shade, just as their ancestors had done for generations. After a moment of shared silence, she began to speak. She chose her words carefully. She did not exaggerate. She did not rush. She explained that a man had come, carrying information tied to old records and broken promises. She said the information could affect their understanding of the past and possibly the future. The elders listened without interruption. Their faces remained calm, but their eyes were sharp with attention. When she finished, one of them asked what she believed should be done. She answered honestly. She said she did not yet know, but she believed the information deserved to be examined, not ignored. Silence had already done enough harm. The elders nodded slowly. One of them reminded the group that history often arrived in pieces, not complete stories. Another spoke about patience and caution. They agreed that nothing should be decided quickly. They asked her to bring the man forward, but only after proper care and preparation. They wanted to hear him, but on their terms. She returned to her land later that day, carrying both relief and weight. When she saw the man, she signaled for him to approach. He did so quietly, his posture respectful. She told him she had spoken to the elders. She explained that they were willing to listen, but that the process would be slow and careful. She made it clear that he would not be the center of attention. The focus would be on the truth itself, not on him. He accepted this without complaint. He said he understood and would follow whatever guidance was given. Over the next several days, the land became a place of quiet preparation. Messages were shared, elders gathered, advisors were consulted. There was no urgency in their movements, but there was purpose. When the day came for the man to speak, the atmosphere was calm but serious. He sat among the elders, not above them, not apart from them. He spoke plainly, just as he had with her. He explained how he had come across the records, how they had been set aside, how they showed agreements that had never been fully honored. He did not speak with drama. He did not defend himself. He answered questions honestly, even when the answers were uncomfortable. Some elders asked about details, others asked about intent. A few remained silent, watching and listening. The process took hours. There were pauses, moments when people needed time to think. No one rushed to judgment. When it ended, the elders asked the man to leave so they could speak privately. He did so without resistance. The woman waited nearby, her heart steady but heavy. She knew this was a turning point. Whatever came next would shape more than just her own life. After a long time, the elders called her back. They thanked her for bringing the matter forward. They told her that the information aligned with stories they had heard long ago but could never confirm. This did not make the truth easier, but it made it clearer. They said the path ahead would not be simple. There would be questions from outside communities. There would be resistance, but there would also be opportunity. An opportunity to speak with evidence, not just memory. They asked her if she was willing to help guide the process. Not as a leader above others, but as a bridge between worlds, between written records and living history. She felt the weight of the request immediately. This was not something she had sought. Her life had been quiet by choice, but she understood why they asked. She had listened. She had carried the whisper without letting it turn into noise. She agreed. When she told the man of the elder's decision, he listened carefully. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply nodded and said he was ready to assist when needed and to step away when not. Days turned into weeks. The work began slowly. Documents were reviewed. Stories were shared. Elders spoke of memories passed down, of land boundaries described through landmarks rather than lines on paper. Each piece added depth to the understanding. There were moments of frustration. Not everyone agreed. Some feared reopening old wounds. Others feared disappointment if change did not come. The woman listened to all sides. She did not force agreement. She reminded others that truth was not meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be honest. The man remained in the background. Sometimes he provided information when asked. Other times he waited quietly. His patience never seemed to fade. One evening, after a long day of discussion, the woman walked alone across the land. The sky glowed with the colors of sunset. She felt tired but not broken. She realized then that the struggle was not just about land or records. It was about dignity, about being seen and heard, about honoring those who came before and those who would come after. She understood that even if nothing changed immediately, the act of speaking truth mattered. Silence had been broken carefully, respectfully, and with purpose. As night fell, she felt a quiet sense of resolve. The path ahead would test her patience and strength. But she was not walking it alone. She had the land, she had her people, and she had chosen honesty over comfort. The coming days would bring challenges, but they would also bring clarity, and that clarity, once found, could not easily be taken away. She stood under the stars once more, not waiting this time, but ready. Time moved forward in its own steady way. Days became weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months. The work that had begun quietly continued with care and patience. There were no loud announcements, no sudden changes. Instead, there was listening, reading, and long conversations that stretched late into the evening. The Apache woman remained at the center of the process, though she never tried to control it. She guided discussions, asked questions, and made sure every voice was heard. Some days were heavy. Old memories surfaced, bringing sadness and frustration. Other days brought calm understanding, moments when pieces finally fit together. She learned that truth did not arrive as a single clear answer. It arrived in layers. Each document, each story from an elder added depth. Together, they formed a picture that was painful but honest. The man stayed true to his word. He never pushed himself forward. When asked, he provided information clearly and without defense. When not needed, he stepped aside. Over time, people began to see him not as an outsider with answers, but as someone who had chosen responsibility over comfort. Not everyone welcomed the process. Some people questioned why the past needed to be revisited. Others feared disappointment if efforts led nowhere. The woman understood these concerns. She did not dismiss them. She reminded everyone that the goal was not quick results, but dignity and clarity. One evening, after a long day of discussion, she sat alone again under the open sky. The stars were bright, scattered across the darkness. She thought back to the night of the whisper. It felt distant now, yet deeply connected to everything that followed. She realized that silence had changed its meaning. Before, it had been a place of waiting. Now, it was a place of strength. Gradually, decisions were made. The elders agreed to present their findings carefully, supported by both written records and lived history. They reached out to others who needed to hear the truth. The process was slow, but it was respectful. There were no promises of immediate change, no guarantees of outcomes, but there was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement carried weight. The woman watched as her people stood a little taller during these conversations, not because everything was fixed, but because they were no longer invisible. One afternoon, she met the man near the edge of the land. The sun was low, casting warm light across the ground. It felt like the right moment to speak openly. She told him that what he had brought had changed many things, not all of them visible. She said the path ahead was still uncertain, but the silence that once held pain had been replaced by shared responsibility. He listened quietly. Then he said something simple. He said that for the first time in many years he felt at peace. Not because he had done something great, but because he had finally done what was right. She nodded. Peace, she knew, was not the absence of struggle. It was the presence of truth. As time passed, the man prepared to leave. His role was complete. The work would continue without him. When the day came, there were no speeches or ceremonies, just quiet understanding. Before he left, he thanked her, not for forgiveness but for trust. She told him that trust had been earned through patience and humility. When he walked away, she watched him until he disappeared into the distance. She did not feel loss. She felt closure. Life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. The land remained. The wind still carried its stories. The woman returned to her daily routines, though she was not the same as before. None of them were. She noticed small changes. Conversations were more open. Questions were asked without fear. The younger generation listened more closely to the elders. The past was no longer something to avoid, but something to understand. One night, as she stood under the stars once again, she thought about the meaning of silence. Silence was not empty. It was full of choices. It could hide truth, or it could protect it until the right moment. She had learned when to speak and when to wait, and that balance had shaped everything. The land felt calm, as if it approved. She placed her hand on the earth, grounding herself in the present. The whisper that had once changed everything no longer echoed sharply in her mind. It had become part of a larger story, a story of patience, courage, and quiet strength. As the night deepened, she stood still, not waiting for answers anymore, but resting in understanding. And in that silence she found peace.